The plane was buzzing with the usual noise. People talking, the sound of seatbelt signs clicking on, the rustle of bags being adjusted overhead. But there was something different today, something in the air that felt off. The hum of the airplane's engines was steady, but the atmosphere inside the cabin was thick with an uneasy energy. Most of the passengers hadn't noticed, but Sarah had. She was always aware of her surroundings, always watching, always listening. It had been her job for years to stay alert, but today it felt like something wasn't right. Sarah sat in her seat by the window, her fingers drumming quietly on the armrest as she glanced around. Her calm demeanor hid the tightness she felt in her chest. She had been on many flights, and none of them had made her feel this way. The turbulence earlier in the flight had been bad, much worse than usual, and though the captain had assured everyone that it was just a small storm, Sarah knew better. There were things happening in the world that ordinary people didn't understand, things that flew under the radar. She could feel that this was one of those moments. The flight attendants walked by, their faces stiff with worry. Sarah noticed the way they looked at each other, how their hands trembled as they served drinks. They were trying to hide it, but their nervousness was clear. Something was going on. Sarah knew they were hiding something from the passengers. But what? Her eyes moved toward the cockpit. The door was still closed, and no one had come out. The captain hadn't made his usual announcements about the flight's progress. Normally, he would check in every hour, telling passengers how far along they were, how much longer the flight would take. But today, the captain had been unusually silent. Sarah's gaze shifted to the flight attendants again. One of them, a young woman named Emily, seemed particularly anxious. She walked past Sarah several times, her hands shaking just enough to be noticeable. She kept glancing over her shoulder toward the cockpit, and that only made Sarah more suspicious. The young woman's discomfort was too obvious to ignore. It wasn't long before Sarah saw the captain emerge from the cockpit, his face drawn tight. He didn't greet the passengers like usual. He didn't even make eye contact. Instead, he walked briskly down the aisle, his footsteps purposeful and quick, his eyes scanning the cabin as if looking for something or someone. It wasn't normal. Captains didn't act like that. Sarah watched him carefully. He wasn't even aware of her gaze, but she was paying attention to every small detail. His uniform was immaculate, but his movements were stiff, almost robotic. Something was off, and Sarah's instincts were screaming at her. She had seen enough in her line of work to know when trouble was brewing. The captain's face, the way he avoided eye contact, the tension in the cabin, all of it pointed to something dangerous lurking just under the surface. Then, just as Sarah was about to turn her attention back to the window, something happened. The captain approached a passenger near the front of the plane. A tall man in a business suit, who had been quiet for most of the flight, suddenly stood up, his body stiffening. Sarah couldn't hear their conversation, but she could see the captain's hand gesture toward him. The businessman's face hardened, and he didn't back down. Something was wrong. The entire cabin seemed to hold its breath. There was a moment of silence that hung between them. And then, before anyone could react, the captain grabbed the man's arm. He jerked him toward the front of the plane, his grip tight and unyielding. The passengers around them gasped. Sarah could hear the murmurs starting to ripple through the cabin. The flight attendants, who had been standing near the back, froze. Emily's eyes widened as she watched the scene unfold, her mouth agape. Sarah didn't hesitate. She stood up quickly, her feet moving with purpose as she made her way toward the front. She didn't know why she was moving, but something told her this was the moment to act. Something was about to happen, and she had to be ready. Just as Sarah reached the row of seats where the captain and the businessmen were standing, she saw the captain turn toward her. His eyes locked onto hers, and for a brief moment, their gazes met. His eyes narrowed, and a flicker of recognition passed through them. "Step away from him," Sarah said in a low, steady voice. The captain didn't respond at first. His grip tightened on the man's arm, and the businessman winced. Sarah took a step forward, her eyes never leaving his. She knew this was dangerous, but she couldn't back down. The tension in the cabin grew thick. The passengers were watching, waiting. Everyone knew something was happening, but no one knew exactly what. Then, with a sudden movement, Sarah reached into her bag and pulled out a small metal badge. She held it up, letting the captain see it clearly. "Federal agent," she said, her voice calm but firm. "I suggest you release him." The cabin fell silent. The flight attendants froze, their faces pale. The businessmen blinked, as if processing what had just happened. The captain stood still, his hand still gripping the man's arm. But he was no longer acting with the same confidence. His eyes flicked to the badge, then back to Sarah. For a long moment, neither of them moved. And then, the captain slowly released the businessman's arm, taking a step back. The tension in the air didn't fade, but it shifted. Now, everyone was waiting to see what would happen next. The flight attendants were no longer pretending that everything was normal. Sarah could see the fear in their eyes. The captain turned and walked back toward the cockpit without a word, his face dark with frustration. But Sarah knew the game had just changed. She was no longer just a passenger. She was part of something much bigger. And the flight was far from over. The air inside the plane was heavy. Nobody was talking now. People stared at Sarah with wide eyes, whispering to each other in shock. A passenger, just a regular woman, they thought, had suddenly stood up and flashed a federal badge. Who was she? And why did the captain back away so quickly? Sarah didn't return to her seat. She stood tall near the front of the plane, her sharp eyes focused on the cockpit door. Her heart was racing, but her face stayed calm. She was trained for moments like this. Something was very wrong, and she needed to find out what before it was too late. The flight attendant stood frozen. Emily, the younger one, finally stepped forward. Her voice shook. "Ma'am, agent, what is going on?" Sarah looked at her calmly. "That's what I'm going to find out. Stay with the passengers. Keep them calm." Emily nodded, clearly scared but relieved that someone had taken charge. Sarah moved slowly to the cockpit door. She knocked twice, loud and firm. No answer. "This is Federal Agent Sarah Grant. Open the cockpit now." Silence. She waited 5 seconds, then knocked again. Still no answer. Her eyes narrowed. She turned to a nearby flight attendant, a man in his 40s with a stiff jaw. "Do you have the override code?" He hesitated. "Only the co-pilot and head attendant know it." "Where's the co-pilot?" The man swallowed hard. "He hasn't come out once since we took off, and we haven't heard his voice either." Sarah's stomach turned. That wasn't right. She nodded toward the small emergency comms phone on the wall. "Try to contact him." The man picked up the phone and tried. "Flight deck, this is cabin crew. Please respond." He paused. No reply. He repeated his message. Still nothing. Sarah glanced at the passengers, who were starting to panic. She had to act fast, but carefully. "Move everyone to the back few rows," she told the flight attendants. "Tell them it's a routine check. I don't want anyone close to this door if something goes wrong." The crew obeyed. Emily walked row by row, gently asking people to relocate. Some passengers argued at first, but the look on Sarah's face made them stop. Now the front of the plane was almost empty. Sarah stepped closer to the cockpit, then turned and reached into her carry-on bag. Inside was a small black pouch. She opened it quickly, revealing a compact toolkit for emergency fieldwork. From it, she pulled out a small device that looked like a thin metal card. She pressed it against a hidden panel on the side of the cockpit door. A tiny screen blinked to life. She entered a code. The light turned green. With a low hiss, the cockpit door unlocked. Sarah pulled it open and stepped inside. What she saw made her freeze. The co-pilot was slumped over in his seat, eyes closed, a faint bruise on his forehead. He was breathing, but unconscious. And the captain? He was sitting in the pilot's seat, staring straight ahead, hands tight on the controls. His face was cold. His knuckles were white. Step away from the controls, Sarah said calmly. The captain didn't move. I said step away. He finally turned to look at her. His eyes were strange. Not afraid. Not angry. Just blank. You shouldn't be in here, he said in a flat voice. Your co-pilot is unconscious. You assaulted a passenger. And you haven't responded to crew calls in over an hour, she replied. Explain yourself. Now. The captain chuckled, low and strange. Do you think you're in control here, Agent? Sarah's fingers moved slowly toward her side holster. She didn't pull her weapon, but she made sure he saw her hand there. Try me, she said firmly. The captain leaned back in his seat. You don't know what you've stepped into. This isn't just about one flight. This is bigger than you think. Sarah frowned. What do you mean? He glanced at the co-pilot, then back at her. They chose the wrong woman to put on this plane. That was enough. Step out of the seat, Sarah ordered. Now. To her surprise, the captain stood. He raised his hand slowly and moved toward her. Sarah stayed alert, eyes locked on him. As he passed her, she reached for the comms. Control, this is Agent Grant. I have control of the cockpit. Co-pilot is down. Captain is being detained. Possible mental breakdown or hostile behavior. Request immediate intervention on landing. She turned to the captain. You're under investigation. Sit down in the jump seat. Hands where I can see them. But the captain just smiled. A cold, dangerous smile. You don't understand, he whispered. There's a reason I took this flight, and it's not over yet. Sarah's heart pounded. She reached for her cuffs, keeping her eyes on him. She had control of the plane now, but she was beginning to understand something terrible. This wasn't just a rogue captain. This was part of a plan, and she was now in the middle of it. Sarah stood in the cockpit, trying to keep her mind clear. The captain sat quietly in the jump seat, still smiling that strange, cold smile. The co-pilot was still unconscious, and the hum of the engines felt louder than usual. Outside, the sky stretched wide and endless, but inside the plane, everything felt tight, tense, and dangerous. She picked up the radio and called again. Control, this is Flight 672. Co-pilot is down. Captain is detained. Please confirm emergency landing instructions. Static. She waited. Still nothing. She tried again. Control, do you read me? Silence. That's when it hit her. There was no response because the signal had been blocked. She checked the instrument panel and noticed something odd. The backup comms system had been switched off manually. Sarah turned to the captain. Why is the backup radio off? He didn't answer. She stepped over to the panel and switched it on again. Suddenly, warning lights blinked across the dashboard. A small red dot began blinking on one of the hidden monitors she hadn't noticed before. Her heart sank. This plane had been modified. Illegally. Who did this? She asked quietly, almost to herself. The captain finally spoke. You weren't supposed to be here. This flight was chosen because it was normal. Quiet. Boring. But you changed that. Sarah glared at him. What were you planning? He leaned forward slightly, his voice low. There's a signal. It was supposed to go out when we reached cruising altitude. It was a test, not of the plane, but of something bigger. Sarah narrowed her eyes. What kind of test? He didn't answer, but she didn't need him to. Her fingers flew across the panel, pulling up the plane's system logs. Buried deep in the data, she found it. A scheduled broadcast. It was set to transmit an encrypted signal to an unknown satellite just before landing. She recognized the coding. It matched known terrorist signatures flagged by Homeland Security. Her stomach turned. This wasn't just a hijack or an angry captain. This was a cyber attack, and she had just stopped the signal from going out. She quickly moved to the cabin, motioning for Emily, the young flight attendant, to come forward. I need your help, she said. We have a real problem. Emily nodded, nervous but ready. Sarah lowered her voice. The captain is involved in something bigger. We can't contact the ground. But the passengers can't know yet. We have to keep things calm. Emily swallowed hard. What do you want me to do? Tell the crew to keep moving through the cabin like nothing's wrong. Keep everyone seated. Offer snacks. Pretend we're just going through a routine delay. Meanwhile, I'll keep working up front. Emily nodded and rushed off. Sarah returned to the cockpit. Her thoughts were racing. She needed a way to send a message, any message, to someone outside. She pulled out her phone. Of course, no signal. But she remembered something. One of the passengers in row 14 had been showing off a satellite texting device before the flight. A hiker, probably, or a tech guy. She grabbed her badge and hurried down the aisle. "Excuse me," she said, stopping at row 14. The man looked up. Tall, skinny, with glasses. He looked nervous. "Sir, I need to borrow your satellite device. Now." He blinked. What's going on?" "I'm with the federal government," she said quickly. "There's a security issue. Please, it's urgent." He didn't ask more questions. He handed her the device. Sarah stepped into the galley area and turned it on. It was slow, but it connected. She typed fast. "Emergency. Flight 672. Captain compromised. Co-pilot down. Cyber attack suspected. Unable to contact ATC. Respond ASAP." She hit send. Now all she could do was wait. Back at the cockpit, the captain was still calm. He looked at her and said, "They're already watching you. This isn't just about this plane. They know who you are now. You've made yourself a target." Sarah ignored him, but the words stuck in her mind. Then the device in her hand buzzed. A response. "Received. Ground teams mobilized. Emergency landing rerouted to secure base. ETA 30 minutes. Hold steady." She finally let out a breath. Help was coming. She turned to the captain. "You failed." But he smiled again. "This was just one signal. You think this is over. You've only seen the beginning." Sarah didn't reply. She just watched him closely. 30 more minutes in the air. 30 more minutes to keep the plane safe. 30 more minutes until they landed. But she knew deep down, something had already started. And whatever it was coming fast. The cabin lights dimmed slightly as the plane began its descent. Passengers looked around nervously. Some whispered. Others stared out the windows, not knowing what was going on. But Sarah knew. She knew every second in the air now mattered. She walked back to the cockpit with the satellite device still in her hand. Her message had gone through. Help was waiting. But the captain's words wouldn't leave her mind. This is just one signal. What else was planned? She stepped into the cockpit again. The captain sat with his hands cuffed, eyes watching her every move. The co-pilot was still breathing, but barely. She had laid him gently on the floor beside the seats, placing a blanket under his head. Sarah looked at the controls. Everything looked normal on the surface. But now she didn't trust anything about this flight. The radar showed the new landing coordinates. They were heading to a secure airbase, one not shown on regular maps. Good. The passengers wouldn't know anything was different unless someone told them. But the captain's smile stayed, and that scared her more than anything else. "You really think they'll believe you?" he said suddenly, voice soft and calm. "You really think they'll land this plane safely?" Sarah didn't answer. He kept talking. "They don't know what's inside this plane. What you stopped from sending was only one part. The real payload is still hidden." Her stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" He leaned forward. "You searched my seat. You checked the systems, but you didn't check the cargo hold." Sarah's hand moved to the intercom. "Emily, it's Sarah. I need you near the cargo bay access door. Don't open anything. Just wait for me there." Emily's voice came back shaky. Yes. I'm on my way." Sarah stood quickly. "You," she said to the captain. "You're coming with me." He smirked. "You'll regret that." She didn't care. She grabbed his arm and guided him down the narrow aisle. Passengers looked shocked. Some stood up, whispering. Sarah flashed her badge. "Sit down. Stay calm. This is for your safety." She and the captain reached the back of the plane where Emily waited. "There's a small hatch," Sarah said, pointing near the floor. "It leads to the cargo space." Emily opened it slowly. Cold air rushed out. The noise of the engines grew louder. Sarah pushed the captain inside first, forcing him to crouch. She followed, flashlight in hand. The space was tight and dark. Boxes were strapped down, and bags filled the corners. Sarah looked around, sweeping the flashlight side to side. Everything looked normal, until she saw a strange black crate near the center. It wasn't labeled. No airline tag. No ID. She turned to the captain. "What is that?" He didn't answer, just smiled. Sarah moved closer, heart pounding. She knelt and touched the crate. It was warm. Too warm. She could feel a low vibration. Something was alive inside, or something was active. She found the latch and opened it slowly. Inside was a metal device. Circular. Wires ran out from its sides and connected to a small battery. A blinking green light flashed once, then twice, then 3 times. Her eyes widened. It was a trigger device. But for what? She turned to the captain. "Is this a bomb?" He grinned. "No, it's worse." Sarah grabbed her comm. "Emergency. We have an active unknown device in cargo. Alert ground crew. This is now a level 1 threat." The captain laughed quietly. "You'll never land this plane." Sarah stood, fury in her eyes. "You've already lost." He shook his head. This wasn't supposed to explode. It was supposed to send a signal to 10 other flights in the air. A chain reaction. Code-sharing autopilot hacks. Your systems are linked, Agent Grant. One goes down, they all go down. Her hands trembled, but she fought to stay steady. She looked at Emily. "Tell the passengers to brace. I'm going to disarm this." Emily rushed out. Sarah knelt again. She opened her small field kit. Her fingers moved quickly, cutting wires, checking circuits. She had done this before. But this was different. This was advanced tech, not just homemade explosives. The green light blinked faster. She had seconds. One wrong move and every plane in the network could be infected. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and cut the blue wire. The blinking stopped. Silence. Then the battery light dimmed and died. She leaned back, breathing hard. It was over. The signal was stopped. For now. The captain stared at her, a strange mix of rage and respect in his eyes. "You don't even know what door you just closed," he said quietly. Sarah stood. "And I don't care. As long as people live." She dragged him back to the cabin, her heart still racing. The passengers looked confused, some frightened, but no one spoke. She picked up the intercom. Her voice was calm but strong. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is Agent Grant. You are safe now. We had a small threat, but it has been handled. Please stay calm. We'll be landing shortly." She ended the call and stared out the window. The city below was growing closer. But Sarah knew this flight was just the beginning. Someone wanted chaos, and she had only delayed them. Now she had to find out who was behind it all. The plane landed smoothly on a long stretch of concrete, surrounded by nothing but open land and fencing. There were no big terminals, no glowing signs, and no waiting passengers. This wasn't a normal airport. It was a secure military airbase, hidden from the public eye, and only used in emergencies like this one. As the plane taxied to a full stop, Sarah stood near the front, watching every move outside. She saw black SUVs already parked near the runway. Armed officers were getting into position, their weapons pointed downward but ready. A medical team stood nearby, waiting to help the injured co-pilot. Inside the cabin, The passengers whispered to each other. Some still didn't know what had happened. Others were just scared and confused. One woman held her baby close. An older man clutched his bag tightly. But no one panicked. They could feel something had gone wrong, but they also knew, somehow, they had been protected. Sarah took a deep breath and opened the cockpit door. 2 officers came up the stairs and saluted her. She showed her badge and nodded. "He's in custody," she said, pointing to the captain, still handcuffed and now silent. "The co-pilot needs urgent care. There's also a disabled device in the cargo hold that must be recovered carefully." The officers moved quickly. One stayed with the captain, while 2 medics rushed to the cockpit and gently lifted the co-pilot out. Sarah stepped aside, letting them pass. Then came a new figure, a woman in a black uniform with silver stripes across the chest. Her walk was sharp, her face calm but alert. "Agent Grant," she said. "I'm Commander Rivas, Homeland Security's Cyber Division." Sarah nodded. "I've seen your name. I didn't expect to meet you like this." Rivas stepped into the cockpit and looked around. She examined the panels, the logs, and the pilot's seat. Then she glanced at Sarah. "You did good. You stopped a test run." Sarah raised an eyebrow. "Test run?" Rivas turned to her fully. "This wasn't just an attack. It was a rehearsal. Someone was testing how far they could go, how deep they could hack our systems without being noticed. You stopped it midair, but they were watching every second from the ground." Sarah's chest tightened. "You're telling me they saw everything I did? Every move?" Rivas nodded. "Yes, and now they know who you are." Sarah looked out the window. The sunset had painted the sky orange and purple. It should have been beautiful, but all she felt was the cold pressure of what was coming. "They knew I was on this flight," Sarah said slowly. "This wasn't random. They wanted me here." Rivas paused. "That's the part we're still trying to figure out. But it looks like someone inside the system flagged your name when you booked the ticket. That's how they found you." Sarah's thoughts raced. So this whole flight, the captain, the device, the hacked system, it was all planned around me. "Yes," Rivas said, "you were the bait, but you turned out to be stronger than they expected." Sarah walked into the cabin again. She looked at the passengers, now slowly being escorted off the plane. Many of them gave her quiet nods of thanks, though they still didn't fully understand what she had done. Then, as she turned toward the exit, a teenage girl stopped her. "Excuse me," the girl said, holding her phone. "Are you, like, a real agent?" Sarah smiled softly. "Yes, I am." The girl looked nervous, then whispered, "Thank you for protecting us." That simple sentence hit Sarah deeper than any explosion. She nodded and moved on. Outside, the sun was almost gone. Officers led the captain to one of the black SUVs. He didn't struggle, but as he passed Sarah, he leaned close and whispered, "You're on a list now, and they don't forget." Sarah stared at him, her voice cold. "Good. Let them come." The SUV doors slammed shut. Commander Rivas joined her outside. "We're flying you back to DC tonight," she said. "There's a lot we need to go over. The device in the cargo hold. It's tech we haven't seen before. Part cyber, part AI, possibly even foreign-made." Sarah asked, "Do we know who sent it?" Rivas shook her head. "Not yet, but you've made them angry. That's a good start." They walked toward another transport plane waiting nearby. But before boarding, Sarah looked back at the aircraft she had just saved. She thought of all the passengers, the frightened child, the confused old man, the girl who had whispered thanks. Then she looked at the night sky. Whoever was behind this didn't care about human life. They wanted fear, confusion, chaos. But now they had something else to deal with. They had her, and she wasn't backing down. The sky above Washington, D.C. was cloudy as Sarah walked up the steps to the agency's command center. Her clothes were clean now, her badge polished, her posture calm. But inside, She was still carrying the weight of Flight 239. The passengers were safe, the hijacker captured, and the device recovered. But something deeper still felt unfinished. The building was tall, glass on the outside and steel on the inside. Inside, large screens showed global maps, red dots blinking across oceans and countries. Dozens of agents walked quickly, speaking in short, urgent tones. But when Sarah entered, the room grew quiet. People turned to look at her, not just as a fellow agent, but as someone who had just survived something terrifying. And stopped it. Commander Rivas waited at the center table, files open, screens glowing with codes and satellite images. "We have something," she said without wasting time. "The device you recovered, it wasn't meant to blow up. It was sending data. Live." Sarah frowned. "To who?" "We don't know yet, but it streamed the flight path, system failures, cockpit audio, and your face." Sarah blinked. "My face." Rivas nodded. "Every move you made. Every command you gave. Someone was watching you like a chess piece." Sarah leaned closer. "They wanted me to stop it." "No," Rivas said. "They wanted to see how you would. You weren't their enemy. You were their test subject." A heavy silence followed. Rivas tapped a key. A video clip began playing on the screen. It showed Sarah during the flight, her face serious, alert, calm. In the corner of the video, strange text scrolled by in a language Sarah didn't recognize. "What language is that?" she asked. "We're not sure," Rivas replied. "It's not any known script. Not Russian, not Chinese, not even encrypted English, but there's a rhythm to it, like a countdown or a formula." Sarah stared at the screen. Then what was the real message? Before Rivas could answer, an alert flashed red across all monitors. A young analyst shouted from the corner, "We just got a hit." Someone uploaded that video of Agent Grant on the dark web. "It's spreading fast, and there's a message below it." "Put it up," Rivas ordered. The screen changed. It now showed the same video of Sarah saving the plane. But below it, in bright red letters, were the words, "One new PA estasid. 6 more to AFOLO." The room went quiet again. Agents stopped moving. Eyes locked on the words. Sarah's heart raced. 6 more what? Flights. Rivas shook her head slowly. "Not flights. Tests." Sarah stared ahead. "They're testing people." Rivas nodded. "And you were number 1. You passed. But that means they have 6 more people they're watching. 6 more targets, or maybe 6 more heroes they're trying to break." Sarah turned to the map. "Can we track them?" "We're trying," Rivas said. "But we don't know the pattern yet. It could be global. It could be in this very city." Sarah took a deep breath. "Then we don't wait. We get ready." Later that night, Sarah sat alone in her apartment, the soft hum of the city outside. She held her badge in one hand and stared at her phone. A message had just arrived. It was from an unknown number. It read, "Well done, Agent Grant. But are you ready to lose?" Attached was a photo of a school playground. In the background, a little boy stood smiling. Sarah's blood ran cold. That was her nephew. She stood up fast, her heart thudding in her chest. They knew her family. They were watching everything. She called Rivas immediately. "They sent me a picture of my nephew." "We've got him," Rivas said quickly. "We already moved him and your sister to a secure location. They're safe. We figured they'd try to scare you." Sarah closed her eyes and let out a shaky breath. "They're not just testing us. They're sending a message," Rivas said, "and we'll send one back." Sarah looked out the window, her reflection barely visible in the glass. She thought about the passengers she saved, the captain she stopped, the strange device that whispered silent codes midair. She thought about her nephew and the other 6 unknown people out there, possibly being watched, tested, or threatened. She spoke softly, to herself, to the night, and to whoever was listening on the other side of that dark screen. You started the game, but now I'm playing too. The screen behind her lit up with another alert. Another test had just begun.